Hi everybody, welcome back. Today I want to give you this feedback and kind of an answer key for the Homeostasis Project nervous system. Some students had a lot of trouble with this, and so I want to take the time to go through this in a stepwise process. Now, these projects that you're going to be doing throughout the semester are harder than filling out AVQs. On the AVQ, all you have to do is listen to the video and write down the things that I say. On the homeostasis projects, I am asking you to put concepts together, to think about what we have learned and remember stuff from 1 or more weeks ago. I expect you to bring forward that information, previous chapters or previous homework assignments, and think about how the new information fits into what we already covered. But I do want to warn you that anything we cover, we're going to keep coming back to. You can't say, hey, I finished transport, don't need to know that anymore, because we're going to literally talk about it in every chapter that we go through. And cellular respiration, same thing. This entire project is based on cellular respiration. So let's go through a couple of the questions. The first question that some people had trouble with was explain the mechanism that caused your body temperature to increase during exercise in the homeostasis lab. Now, one of the things that I was kind of surprised about is that this caused so much trouble. The reason I was surprised is that this is literally the same question that I asked last week on the homeostasis project, muscular system, and the stimulus. So not only did I ask it of you last week, and most of you did it last week, I also gave you a key which gave you the answer to this last week. So please spend enough time on these things that you will remember it when you see it again. The second thing that I was surprised about is that people really had a hard time just answering the question. A lot of people wrote something to the effect of, when I worked out, my body temperature increased, which really is just a restatement of the question. I'm looking for you to give me the how and the why for these questions. So you need to answer both the how and the why. How does your body temperature increase and why does it increase? So let's talk about cellular respiration. And if you remember, this is what cellular respiration looks like. It happens in the mitochondria, and we're breaking down glucose and we're making ATP. If we were to write out the reactants and the products, we have glucose, which is broken down. The 6 carbons of glucose get broken apart, and all those bonds are broken, and we harvest the energy. And those 6 carbons become CO2. Oxygen is the final electron acceptor, and it combines, after it's accepted the electrons, it's going to combine with hydrogen ions and become H2O. And the energy stored in glucose partly becomes ATP, so 40% of the energy stored in glucose becomes ATP, but don't forget, it is very inefficient. And so about 60% of the energy stored in glucose is lost to the environment, to the body, as heat. So in this question, explain the mechanism that caused your body temperature to increase during exercise. I was looking for you to say, during exercise, the muscles need ATP. They need ATP to do a couple of things. Run the sodium pumps. So pump sodium back outside the cell. Pump calcium back inside the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And break the cross bridges between actin and myosin. So because we need so much energy, we need to do a lot of cellular respiration. When we break down glucose to make ATP, about 60% of the energy in glucose is lost as heat. So your body heats up during exercise because you're performing a lot of cellular respiration to make ATP, which is used for these couple of things. That covers the how. How did we get hot? And why did we get hot? We got hot because it was inefficient and we lost heat. And why did that happen? Because we were doing cellular respiration. The next question was, in the first 10 to 20 seconds of exercise, hypothesize what you think happened with your oxygen levels in the blood and why. So don't forget, we're still looking for the how and the why. What I was looking for was some kind of explanation that oxygen is required to make ATP. When you first start exercising, your O2 levels are going to go down in the cell. So O2 will decrease in the cell because it's being used up to make ATP. Therefore, there creates a gradient. As oxygen gets used up in the electron transport chain, it becomes very low in the cell. And so the oxygen from the blood will leave the blood and go into the cell. Now, if you weren't constantly using up oxygen, this might stop. But because we're constantly using up oxygen in the electron transport chain, you're going to constantly be pulling oxygen out of the blood and into the cell. So the answer here could be that oxygen levels will decrease in the cell because you are using it to make ATP, and it is the final electron acceptor. As oxygen levels go down in the cell, it creates a gradient, which causes oxygen to leave the blood and enter the muscle cell. The last question was, in the first 10 to 20 seconds of exercise, hypothesize what you think happened with your CO2 levels and why. So remember that your glucose becomes CO2. This is the waste product that is going to build up as you create ATP. So as ATP goes up, CO2 will also go up in the cell. So the answer to the question would be that your CO2 levels will increase in the blood because you're creating ATP. As CO2 levels in the cell increase in the cell, it creates a gradient. CO2 will diffuse out of the cell and into the blood, raising the CO2 levels in the blood. Now, a lot of people said that CO2 levels had to go up because oxygen levels went down, but if you think about it, oxygen and CO2 are going to independently operate here. If CO2 levels start suddenly going up and up and up in the cell, it's just going to leave because remember, CO2 is one of those molecules that can diffuse directly through the plasma membrane. And as oxygen is being used and it goes down, it's constantly being used up. No matter how much we put in there, it's being used up because we're doing so much cellular respiration. It's going to create a gradient going the other way. So oxygen is going to be constantly coming into the cell and being used up and pulling more oxygen out of the blood. And CO2 is going to be constantly produced and going into the blood. So these two operate independently. It doesn't really matter what CO2 is doing if you're looking at what oxygen is doing. So on future assignments, please make sure to read the key and understand the concepts. They will come back again and again. Please make sure to read the question. Answer that question. I saw a lot of people answering questions that were not asked and neglecting to answer the actual question that I asked. Please make sure to give me the how and the why. How does it happen? Why does it happen? That's what I'm looking for. That shows that you really understand the concept. So some examples of not complete answers. During exercise, your muscles convert stored energy into heat energy, causing your body to warm up. So this is actually correct. Yes, your muscles do convert stored energy into heat energy. How do they do it? Why do they do it? This is not complete. Another example, and these are student examples. Oxygen is decreased in the blood when you start to move your body because it is leaving the blood and being drawn into the muscle tissue. Yep, it is. It's leaving the blood and it's being drawn into the tissue, and it does get decreased in the blood. How? Why? Not explained. CO2 is increased in the blood as it leaves the tissues and enters the bloodstream to be circulated to the lungs and excreted. Well, sure, this actually does happen. How does this happen? Is there a gradient? Is it being actively transported? Is something else going on? Why is it happening? Why do you have so much CO2 there to start with? That was not explained in this answer. The glucose level has decreased because it was used during the exercise to help oxygen in the tissues. Okay, well, how is glucose helping oxygen? It actually goes the other way. Oxygen helps break down glucose, but really by the time oxygen is involved, let's go back. By the time oxygen gets involved over here, glucose has already been broken down and the CO2 has been created. And all we're talking about is the energy that's left over from those bonds. So really, glucose and oxygen aren't even in the same place at the same time. So please, in the future, how and why, that's what I'm looking for. If you concentrate on answering the question with the how and the why, you'll do very well. Thanks for listening. I hope you have a great day.